There is something strange that happens in backyards all over the world. 1 second, your yard is alive. A cardinal is singing from the maple tree. Sparrows are moving through the shrubs. A robin is pulling worms from the lawn. The air is full of sound. Life. Movement. Conversation. And then, everything stops. The songs disappear. The chirping ends. The trees become strangely still. Even the birds that were calling non-stop just moments ago, have gone silent. If you've ever experienced this, you probably looked around wondering what happened. Maybe you checked the sky. Maybe you looked for a cat. Maybe you listened for something unusual. But most of the time, you find nothing. The silence arrives suddenly. And it feels almost unsettling. Like the entire neighborhood received a warning, except you. And in a way, that's exactly what happened. Because birds are constantly monitoring a world of sounds, movements, vibrations, and signals that humans rarely notice. They hear things earlier, detect danger faster, and communicate information across entire bird communities in seconds. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most fascinating mysteries of bird behavior. Why birds suddenly go silent. What they're detecting that you can't. And why that eerie silence may be one of the most sophisticated survival systems in the natural world. Stay until the end, because the final reason we cover explains why birds sometimes become silent even when there appears to be absolutely no danger at all. And once you understand it, you'll never hear a quiet backyard the same way again. When most people hear birds singing, it sounds like background noise. A pleasant soundtrack to everyday life. But to birds, those sounds serve a purpose. Birdsong isn't simply music. It's information. Researchers have long known that bird communities communicate continuously throughout the day. Who is here? Who is feeding? Where danger exists? Which territories are occupied? Whether conditions are safe. Your backyard may sound chaotic. To the birds living there, it's an organized information network. Which means when that network suddenly goes quiet, something important has changed. The silence isn't an absence of communication. The silence is communication. And every bird nearby understands exactly what it means. One of the most common reasons birds suddenly stop singing is surprisingly simple. A predator has appeared. But often, not where you're looking. Researchers studying songbird behavior have found that birds can detect predators long before humans become aware of them. A hawk soaring hundreds of feet above. An owl hidden among branches. A fox moving through distant brush. Even the shadow of a predator crossing overhead can trigger an immediate change in behavior. And the reaction spreads fast. Sometimes a single bird notices first. An alarm call is given. Nearby birds respond. Then neighboring birds respond. Within seconds, an entire area can shift from active communication to complete silence. To a human observer, it feels instant. To the birds, it was a coordinated response. The danger may still be invisible to you. But every bird around you already knows it's there. This is where things become extraordinary. Many bird species don't simply warn each other that danger exists. They describe the danger. In a landmark 2005 study published in Science, researchers Christopher Templeton, Eric Green, and Kate Davis discovered something remarkable about black-capped chickadees. Their famous chick-a-dee-dee-dee calls actually contain detailed information. The number of D notes changes depending on the threat. A larger predator receives one response. A smaller, more agile predator receives another. In other words, the birds aren't just shouting, "Danger." They're saying, "Here's exactly what kind of danger." Even more incredible, other bird species listen. Nuthatches, warblers, titmice, woodpeckers. Species that don't even speak the same language still understand the warning. Your backyard is essentially operating as a neighborhood-wide emergency broadcast system. And when enough birds receive the message, the singing stops. Humans often assume we're aware of our surroundings. Compared to birds, we're not. Birds can detect sounds far earlier than most people realize. The distant wing beats of an approaching hawk. Subtle rustling in vegetation. Alarm calls from birds hundreds of feet away. Movement through tree canopies. Researchers studying avian vigilance have found that birds are constantly dividing their attention between feeding and monitoring their environment. Even while singing. Even while eating. Even while resting. Part of their brain is always listening. Always scanning. Always evaluating risk. That's why birds often react to threats several seconds, or even minutes, before humans notice anything unusual. To them, danger announces itself long before it becomes visible. This part surprises many people. Sometimes the reason birds become silent isn't a hawk. It isn't an owl. It isn't a predator at all. It's you. Birds pay extraordinary attention to human behavior. Research from the University of Washington led by Professor John Marsloff demonstrated that crows can recognize individual human faces and remember them for years. Other studies have shown similar recognition abilities in mockingbirds and pigeons. The birds in your neighborhood know who belongs. And who doesn't. A familiar homeowner walking through the yard may barely affect them, but an unfamiliar person. Different clothing. Unusual movements. Unexpected activity. These can trigger caution. And caution often sounds exactly like silence. The birds aren't necessarily terrified. They're gathering information. Watching. Evaluating. Deciding whether normal activity should continue. Now we arrive at one of the strangest explanations of all. Sometimes birds become quiet because of something that hasn't happened yet. Weather. Long before humans developed weather apps, radar systems, and forecasts, birds were already responding to atmospheric changes. Researchers have discovered that many species detect shifts in barometric pressure. Changes that often occur hours before storms arrive. Birds may feed differently. Move differently. Seek shelter. Or become noticeably quieter. One famous study tracking golden-winged warblers found that the birds altered migration behavior and left areas before severe weather systems arrived. Not during. Before. The birds responded to environmental cues humans couldn't perceive. Which means that on some days, when your yard suddenly becomes quiet, the birds may be responding to a future event. Something that hasn't happened yet. But is already on its way. I think the reason people notice these moments so deeply, is because silence feels wrong. Birdsong is life. Movement. Activity. Connection. When it disappears suddenly, something inside us immediately notices. And maybe that's because silence once carried important information for humans too. For thousands of years, our ancestors paid attention when nature suddenly became quiet. Because silence often meant danger was nearby. The birds knew. And if the birds knew, it was worth paying attention. Today, most of us no longer rely on those signals. But the birds still do. Every day. Every hour. Every minute. They're listening. Monitoring. Communicating. Sharing information across an invisible network that surrounds us constantly. And every once in a while, that network sends a message so important that the entire system pauses. The songs stop. The calls disappear. The trees become still. And for a brief moment, the natural world holds its breath. The next time you hear birds suddenly go silent, don't ignore it. Look around. Listen carefully. You may not know exactly what the birds detected. But chances are, they noticed something before you did. And honestly, that's one of the most fascinating things about them. Tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced a moment when all the birds suddenly went silent? What happened next? I will read all your comments. I'll see you in the next video.